In Proverbs chapter 5, 6, and 7 is where we are at. And when you look at these chapters, as a matter of fact, if you look at them like in totality, like right there, what you will notice is that all of this, well, maybe I need to make that a little bit bigger, okay? All of this, all of that, and all of this, this is chapter 5, this is chapter 6, this is chapter 7. So everything in the yellow highlighted circles is about adultery. So there is a lot about it. He starts off to talk about the foolishness of adultery, and then he goes on, and in this little section right here, we've got some Proverbs, actually. They're extended Proverbs, but we've got four different Proverbs that are listed there. And then he goes back to adultery, and then he goes back to adultery. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to kind of take a look at the sections on adultery a little bit, because obviously it's important enough to warrant so much discussion. So we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to go back into chapter 6, and we're going to talk about those other Proverbs too, okay? Now, what all of this is about is just simply kind of warnings about foolishness, warnings about folly. And so when we take a look at chapter 5, just a couple little verses that I've thought of as I go down through here. You notice that he says, talking about the adulterous woman, he says in verse number 1, "My son, pay attention to wisdom and turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is as bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword." So, here he is kind of contrast saying, I want your lips to maintain knowledge, wisdom, but at the same time, the adulterous woman, her lips are not going to be doing something that involves wisdom and knowledge. What I think that we need to realize is that when we look at these passages of Scripture is that adultery is something that is very easy for people to fall into the trap of doing, but at the same time, it is a very destructive and disastrous thing. If you were to come up and just say, hey, I've got a hatchet here. Would you like to chop your arm off? What would you say? No. I come up and I say, hey, I've got a gun here. Would you like to shoot yourself in the head? You would say, no. Okay. So why is it that when we look at adultery and we look at the harm and the problems that it causes, why is it that it is so prevalent? Because most people around the globe, they know that adultery is wrong. It doesn't really matter where you go, what society, there is kind of a standard thing, adultery is wrong. There is some people who, are just kind of libertine in their values, and they just simply say, well, I can do whatever I want. But outside of those people, most people will say adultery is wrong, we shouldn't do it. But why is it that it is such an easy trap to fall into? I guess it has to do with the lust of the flesh. But you notice in verse number 3 where he says that the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey. And so, there is this allurement. Of course, we're talking about the adulterous woman. And at the same time, you may be thinking, well, isn't there an adulterous man? Yeah, there is. It's just that since Solomon's talking to his sons, then everything else is phrased in, the fair sex, so to speak, as far as what's going to be attracting the young men, right? Okay? And so here is the adulterous woman. Her lips are dripping oil, but in reality, her speech is going to be smoother, or her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end, she's as bitter as gall and sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she doesn't know it. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near her door, lest you lose your honor to others, your dignity to one who is cruel. And so there is always going to be a consequence to adultery. There's always going to be a negative side of things. And so the best thing that we need to do is we just need to steer far and clear from it, right? Okay. Now I'm going to keep on going down through here, and just like we did last week, if there is something in particular that you're like, hey, wait a minute, I want to talk about that, then stop me and we'll talk about it. Okay? All right. Something else that I've often thought of is when you take a look at verses 15 and 16, it says, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets and your streams of water in the public square? And we continue on down into verses 18 and 19. It says, may your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice with the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May your breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Why, my son, be intoxicated with the other man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman? And so, even though people may say, looking at somebody else, that there's this attraction and everything that's there, you need to steer clear from her. And in the case of people who are married, that means that we need to gravitate to what we have and be grateful for what we have, and always stay with what we have, because the minute that we start losing that satisfaction, then that's when we're going to be able to open ourselves up to temptation to other people. Okay? All right. Well, going on down into chapter 6 and in verse number 20. So in chapter 6 and in verse number 20, again, we start out by saying, my son, keep your father's command. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them always on your heart. Fasten them around your neck. And so all of these things are involving wisdom, right? And so this is something that a wise person is going to have very close to them on hand, because this command is a lamp and this teaching is a light, and correction and instruction are the way to life. And it's going to keep us from your neighbor's wife or the smooth talk of a wayward woman. Verse number 25 says, do not lust in your heart after her beauty, or captivate you with her eyes. For a prostitute can be had for a loaf of bread, but another man's wife preys on your very life. This, in verse number 26, can also be translated, and is translated, for a prostitute will reduce you to a loaf of bread, but another man's wife preys on your very life. I think it can be, kind of translated as both ways. But the point of the matter is just simply that when you go down that step, whether it's a prostitute for a young man, or for an extramarital affair, wayward wife, that this is going to have negative repercussions upon the life of the young man. And so, therefore, he just needs to steer clear from it. He goes on down in verse number 27, says, can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So let me ask you the question. Can you take a bunch of hot coals and dump it in your lap and expect good to come from it? Can you expect to take a nice leisurely stroll across hot coals and expect it to come out, okay, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Aside from firewalkers that go across very quickly, if somebody goes out and has a nice leisurely stroll right in the middle of it, it doesn't turn out too well, right? And so that kind of, those questions right there kind of really drive home the point about what happens with adultery. Now, when you think about adultery, what good comes from it? Can you think of any good that comes from adultery? What about bad? Can you think bad that comes from adultery? A lot of it, right? I mean, if I were to go and commit adultery, I think about the consequences that would incur to my life. Okay? Number one, it's going to severely hurt my marriage. Okay? Number two, it's going to devastate the woman that I love. Okay? Number three, because it devastates the woman that I love, then I'm going to be afflicted with the bad conscience of doing that. Right? What about my family? What kind of effect will it have on my children or on my grandchildren? Okay. What kind of effect would it have on my ministry? How could I pastor a church after that? What kind of effect would it have on my witness and my work for the Lord? Right? Now, when you stop to think all of those in effect, I mean, those are some pretty bad things right there. And not only that, but, if you think about people who, the one person in the relationship, they have an adulterous affair, the marriage ends in divorce, and then you've got financial consequences that come from the divorce, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, when you think and you start to look at, adultery, there really isn't any good that comes out of it. I know that there's going to be some people who say, well, you know what, I was married before, but now I'm with this person, I couldn't be happier. Well, okay, you may be happy, but at the same time, what about the wake of destruction and everything that you have left in your path? Okay? I mean, there is that. And not only that, but I think that there is always going to be some sort of unintended consequence that comes up from it, some sort of unrealized consequences that's going to come up from it as well, not to mention just simply our spiritual relationship that we have with the Lord, right? And so there isn't any good thing that comes out of adultery. There's only bad things that come from adultery. And so why is it that people just try to, do it all the time? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Okay. All right. We go on into chapter 7. And in chapter 7, we've got kind of a story of an adulterous woman. Chapter 7, verse number 1, it says, "My son, keep my words and store up my commands within you. Keep my commands and you will live. Guard my teachings as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and to insight, you are my relative. They will keep you from the adulterous woman." Do you understand that if we do not have wisdom that's there, we're putting ourselves at risk, right? We've got to have wisdom that's there, and a lot of that wisdom is just simply listening to what these commandments are and saying, you know what, I'm going to follow these, and I'm going to do my best to steer clear of everything like that. But in verse number 6, you notice that he's kind of like telling this story, right? He says, "At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. I saw among the simple. I noticed among the young men a youth who had no sense." Is there ever such a thing like that? Kinsey, who works in a high school, she can tell you right off the bat, yeah, there is. Okay? All right. Notice among the young men a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house at twilight as day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Then came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute with crafty intent. She is unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner she lurks. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face she said, "Today I have filled my vows, and I have food for my fellowship offering at home. So I came to meet you. I looked for you and I found you. I have covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not home. He has gone on a long journey. He has filled his purse with money and will not be home till full moon. With persuasive words, she led him astray and seduced him with her smooth talk. Okay? And so, I read that story and I can just kind of see it, can't you? Here's a guy, he's out with his friends, he's not really thinking about anything, isn't he? He's just simply thinking about life and what kind of fun he can have. What kind of fun, he can just simply stumble into. And guess what? It seems like a lot of times when somebody's out looking for quote unquote fun tends to find them, right? And so here is fun, this adulterous woman who's come out and, she comes out to find him. He is so important to her, but really he isn't at all, is he? Because, as soon as they get finished with that and all of that, seems to me that she's going to be going off for somebody else, okay? Notice that it sounds like she's got it all worked out, doesn't it? It sounds like she's got it worked out as far as, here's this beautiful bed that's covered with all kinds of cinnamon, aloe, and myrrh. You notice that she's got it worked out in terms of her husband isn't home. He's gone on a long journey. He took his purse. He's not going to be home for a long time. We can do this and nobody is ever going to know. She says that she's got food from her fellowship offerings at her house. And so, everything is right there. A meal is prepared. So when you look at this, it just seems like it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. There's not going to be any consequences whatsoever, right? And I think that a lot of times people will look at not just simply in the act of, technical adultery, but all sorts of sexual sins that we have today. People will say, well, as long as you've got consenting adults that, are responsible, meaning by that responsible, we take care of all the consequences, what's the harm in it? Well, okay, to be responsible adults, we should be wise adults. And wise adults say, you need to steer clear from this situation, number one. Because, number two, you're not going to take care of all the consequences. You may take care of some consequences, but you won't take care of all the consequences that are there. Okay? All right. And so what happens is that all at once he follows her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into the noose, till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Now, does this mean that every time somebody engages in adultery, they will die? Not a physical death. But again, there are consequences. And do you think that there are some consequences worse than death? I named off, consequences that I foresee in my life. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'd rather have a hole in my head than to do any of that and create those consequences. I've never had somebody come up and proposition me for an affair. I hope I never have somebody proposition me for an affair. If somebody does, I would probably be too stupid to even realize what they were talking about. But, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, you want to have an affair, I think I would be tempted to say, I'd rather have a hole in my head than to do that. And I really honestly mean it, because there are things that are worse than death. And this is one of them. Okay? And so what do we need to do? Well, just this. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the graves, leading down to the chambers of death. There have been many a leader who has fallen because of adultery down throughout the centuries. There's been many a man who has lost fortunes because of adultery. There's been many a person whose lives have been ruined because of adultery. You know, where it says that her victims she's brought down are a mighty throng, there is absolute truth in that, isn't there? All right, you got any questions or comments about that?
You mentioned that there's always that person that's like, oh, I committed adultery and I left my wife and I'm so much happier with this person and this family and blah, 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 blah. I can't help but thinking about, in 10 years, whenever you start having marital strife, first thing you're going to think of is he going out?
Yeah.
Because that's how she got him.
Yeah.
So what's he going to do when he gets bored?
I think one of the other consequences could be physical death, because if that person you're with, her husband, comes home and kills you, which
Yes.
I know people that's happened to.
Yeah.
And then so I mean, you talk about you might be gone, but your kids now know, plus they lost you because you were, it's just, it's awful.
Yeah. That is, let me see, in verse number, or chapter number 6, and in verse number 32, but a man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. Blows and disgrace are his lot, and his shame will never be wiped away. For jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge. He will not accept any compensation. He will refuse a bribe, however great it is. So you're absolutely right, Carol. Yeah. All right. Nobody else has any comments over that? Okay. Well, then let's take a look at chapter 6, and let's take a look at these 4 different proverbs. They are related in terms of, we've got warnings about adultery. Now we've got warnings about other stuff too, okay? And so, there's a lot of warnings about adultery and saying it's foolish to do it, don't do it. Now, in these verses, we've got warnings about don't do this. This is something that's foolish. It's going to be harmful to you, but it's different than adultery, okay? So, excuse me. In verse number 1, it says, "My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, if you have been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth, so do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into a neighbor's hands. Go to the point of exhaustion and give your neighbor no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself from the gazelle, from the hand of a hunter, like a bird from the snare of a fowler." We look at that and you say, what in the world are we talking about? Okay, you got to back up and understand the customs and the culture of the day. Customs and culture of the day is that, you didn't really have lending companies, right? You had one person going up to another person and saying, hey, will you put up some sort of security or surety for me? Okay? I want to launch into this business adventure. I got to get something from this guy over here. He wants money, but I can't pay him money. Why don't you go and if you will guarantee me, then, I can go and I can do this and then I can repay you. Okay? Sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? Okay. But notice that this is that you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger. Okay? You really don't know this guy, and you really don't know what character he is. Maybe he had a very good business proposal to do, and you thought, hey, this is going to be great. I like this guy. He's on the up and up. And then you went home and you started to think, wait a minute, who is this guy? I don't even know him. I don't even know what kind of character he is. Because see, in this situation where you're putting up security for somebody else, then you, under the guidelines of that day, you are responsible for it. And you could be, taken to court. You could be, have all your money taken away. You could even be put in slavery because of it. If you go and if you don't have the funds to pay somebody else, then you become that person's indentured servant until all of that debt's paid off. And so if you, for a stranger, go and you strike hands to be a security for somebody, and then all of a sudden they're gone, then it's not like you can go file for bankruptcy. Guess who is left holding the bag? You are. And you say, well, I don't have the money for it. Too bad, You're going into slavery. Your family may be going into slavery to pay for it. And so in that kind of situation, if all of a sudden you go and you do something like that, which is foolish to begin with, but later on you realize, oh, wow, man, I didn't need to do that. What do? Well, you go to that neighbor and you say, look, hey, this guy's come to you. He says that I'm going to be put up security for him. I'm out of this. I don't want anything to do with this. You notice that it says here, go to the point of exhaustion, and then there's this little text note A. You follow that little text note A, and it says, or humble yourself. I think that maybe humble yourself might be a good way to go about doing this. If you go to the neighbor, you need to have a little bit of humility there and say, hey, I'm really, 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 really sorry. I don't mean to be in this, and you need to really press your case to get out of this situation, because it's going to be, it could potentially be a very bad situation. Okay. You got any questions or comments about that one? All right. Well, let's take a look at this one right here. Take a look at the ant. Okay? So what we see in verses 6 through 11 is, go to the ant, you sluggard. What do you think it means by go to the ant?
Look at the Ant Kinsey.
A. Kinsey? No. A-N-T, not A-U-N-T. Go to the ant is just simply consider the ant. Look at the ant. Take a notice about what the ant is doing. Okay? So you sluggard, by the way, what is a sluggard? Don't say me. That lazy guy. Okay. You sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. Now, I understand that ants are, have a very complex structure and network in the I guess it's not a hive. What do you call a colony? In the colony, but we're not talking about the colony. We're talking about the ant, the individual. And so when you look at the ant individually as it is there going about its business, what is it doing? It has no commander, no overseer or ruler. Yet it stores its provision in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Okay? All right? So what can we take about that for our own lives? Let me ask you something. Which is it easier to do? And you can be honest. I'm going to be honest. It's easier to do what I'm about to say. It is easier to work under supervision and with people around than to work by yourself. Isn't it? Okay? There's going to be some people it's like, no, I can be fine. All right, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm not going to argue with it. But a lot of times it is easier to work when you have got somebody there, and you are more productive when you got somebody there than if you're on your own. Okay? Why is that? You're distracted. You don't really have a sense of urgency. But more to the point, at least, this is for me, if somebody's there, I want to look good, right? I want to do a good job. I want to be a hard worker. If somebody's not there, okay, it's easy to get distracted. Okay. So if we're going to be wise, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ant, and his motivation is not going to be in the fact that there's some commander or overseer or ruler that is right there in his vicinity. He's going to be working no matter what, because he realizes, hey, I've got to do this task now while I can and store up provisions. Okay? And so, verse number 9, how long will you lie there, you sluggard, and when will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Okay? And so, we've got to look at what we need to get done and get it done, because if we don't get it done, then it's not going to be done. If it's not done, then we've got the consequences to deal with it, right? Questions and comments about that one?
That always makes me feel bad when I can't get up in the morning for work.
You know, so J.D. Garza, I think I probably have said this story before, but when I was in seminary, I was in a dorm, and we didn't have any class on Monday. And so, Monday morning I thought, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to work. Didn't have set hours, I just need to go in. So I'm going to get up, go into work. I'm going to start the day out, productive day. I'm going to get work done so I can get back, I get studying done, everything like that. But the only problem is I was sleep deprived. And so Monday morning, it was really, really, really hard to get out and get up out of bed. And so from looking at Proverbs, I thought, I got it. I went and I put a proverb. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like that, okay? And I put it up on the ceiling so that as I was sitting there hitting the snooze button, I'd roll over and I'd look and I'd go, oh yeah, I got to get up. And, it would try to hopefully prompt me to get up. Okay, well anyway, that school year ended. I went back to New Mexico, came back, didn't go back to the dormitory for, different reason altogether. And one of my good friends, J.D. Garza, came in and just happened to be right there in my room. I didn't know him at the time. Later, he became my good friend. But at the time, in fact, after we became friends, and this was months later, and we were talking, then he told me this story. He said, it was the very first day I was there in seminary, and I woke up that morning, and I rolled over, and I opened my eyes, I stared at the ceiling, and went, man, they are really strict here. And he got up, and he's like, I got to go get a job. And he went out and he got a job. And I laughed and I said, JD, I put that sign up to help me. I forgot to take it down. So anyway, okay, going on down. Here is something. Verse number 12 through verse number 15 is another proverb. Now, proverbs are usually just short sayings, right? They're just usually one or two verses. But there are many times proverbs are extended proverbs, and these are some of the cases of it, okay? Verse number 12, a troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with the eye, signals with the feet, and motions with his fingers, who plots evil with deceit in his heart. He always stirs up conflict. Therefore, disaster will overtake him in an instant. He will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. Okay? So, we have somebody who is a troublemaker. He's a villain. He's up to no good. He's got a corrupt mouth. He has got evil with deceit in his heart. And he is somebody who is always stirring up conflict. Imagine that. Somebody who's got a corrupt mouth, who's got deceit in his heart, is he going to be a peacemaker? Nah, he's going to be stirring up trouble. And you notice what he does here. That is, he winks maliciously with his eye. Okay? Have you ever, come across people that, they're talking to you, but then they look at somebody else and kind of give a little wink? Okay? That's kind of an indication of, uh-oh, something's up. Or, they're kind of signaling somebody, or maybe they're just kind of shuffling their feet, trying to get the attention of something. In other words, there is some kind of conspiracy that is forming around you, right? And here is this person doing it. Notice that the person who is doing this and at the same time is going to be stirring up conflict as he's doing it, preferably to get some sort of benefit from it. You notice that disaster is going to overtake him in an instant, and he's suddenly going to be destroyed without remedy. Does that mean that, if you come up to somebody and, they're doing that, does it mean that you could just sit there and wait and go, okay, Lord's going to wipe them out? Lord, you need time now? No. But what this is talking about is that somebody who's going to be living like this, sooner or later, it's going to catch up with them. Okay? And so the wisdom to this is, well, you don't need to be that way. Right? Okay? Something else that is similar to that in verse number 16 through verse number 19, this is a passage that I've always really liked. And that is, there's 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. What we're going to find is that as we look through Proverbs, we're going to find that formula in place. And that is, there's like 6 things and 7, or 4 things and 5, or something like that. And so it's drawing attention on the last thing. Okay? And so when we look at this here, what we have, it's 6 things that the Lord is hating, but then 7 are detestable to him. Now let me ask you a question. What is the difference between hate and detest?
Hate and really hate.
Okay, hate and really hate. So here we've got 6 things that are bad, and then a 7th thing that is really bad, right? Okay, 6 things the Lord does not want, but number 7 is going to be the kicker. Right? Okay, so what is it? Okay, number 1 is going to be haughty eyes. Okay? Number 2 is going to be a lying tongue. Number 3 is going to be hands that shed innocent blood. Number 4 is going to be a heart that devises wicked schemes. Number 5 is going to be feet that are quick to rush into evil. Number 6 is going to be a false witness who pours out lies. Okay? So look at this. Haughty eyes. What are haughty eyes?
Someone
Kind of look,
they like,
somebody
they're
proud,
puffed
arrogant.
up.
Okay, somebody's...
They kind of look down on others.
They're looking down on others. They're puffed up. They're always... Their eyes are, it's, I'm better than everybody else. Okay? The Lord doesn't like that. Did you know that? God doesn't like that. You know why? Because from the Lord's perspective, we're all the same. Okay? A lying tongue. Okay? So here we've got a tongue. Somebody's just, constantly telling lies about things. Why do you suppose the Lord hates that? It's not true. Because it's not true. And when you think about God who is holy, then you also think about God who is true. Is there ever going to be a time that God lies? No. Why? Because He's holy, right? And because He's holy, He is also going to be opposed to lying. Okay, something else. Hands that shed innocent blood. That's a no-brainer right there, right? The Lord detests that. I mean, you go all the way back to the days of Cain and Abel. Cain killed his brother Abel, and the Lord detests it. Okay? We have a heart that devises wicked schemes. Why do you suppose the Lord hates that one?
If you're devising them, you're going to carry them out.
Yeah, it's the malice that's there, right? You know, these wicked schemes could involve all kinds of stuff. It could involve lies. It could involve shedding innocent blood. It could involve taking someone else's money. You know, it's somebody who's just constantly thinking about evil things to do. You know, this is this heart. They get off on it. They love it. There's a rush and a thrill from doing this. Well, the Lord hates that. And then we look at feet that are quick to rush into evil. Have you ever noticed somebody like that? You know, they're just simply, when bad is there, they don't have any forethought about it all. They don't ever stop and pause and think, should I do that? Bad is there, so very quickly, they take off to it. Okay?
They're not just like falling into it, they're seeking it out.
Yeah. They're, you know, as long as the opportunity presents itself, they want to do it. And then a false witness who pours out lies. Okay, the same thing. In fact, we go back to the, the 10 Commandments, and that is that you shall not bear false witness. Okay. All right. So here we've got all these 6 things, but yeah.
I think we both have the same
What's the difference between a lying tongue and a false witness who pours out lies?
So a lying tongue is going to be somebody who's telling some sort of falsehood. A false witness, I mean, it's very going to be close, but a false witness is going to be testifying to something that is wrong. Okay? And so, I come up to you and say, hey, I can't think of a good lie to tell you, but to get something from you, or something like that. But false witness is going to be, me going to the police and saying, hey, did you know that such and such did this in order to get them into trouble?
You're lying against another person.
You are testifying against someone falsely.
False accusation.
Yes.
Versus just lying.
Right.
About whatever.
Yep. Okay. All right. So now we can see number 1 through 6 about what the Lord hates. But number 7, what does the Lord really hate? Somebody who stirs up conflict in the community, whatever community it is. Church, somebody who's stirring up trouble in church. In a classroom, somebody who's stirring up trouble in a classroom. In an organization, somebody who's stirring up trouble there. In a family, somebody who's stirring up trouble there. When you stop and think, you look at all these things that the Lord hates, with a haughty eyes, lying tongue, hands that shed blood, so on and so forth, we can all say, oh yeah, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. But then you got somebody who's being a troublemaker. Is that not bad too? I mean, somebody who is stirring up conflict in whatever community that they are there, it is something that can go and extend beyond them. It's something that can destroy that community, whatever that community is. You can be in a church and you can have, 90% of the people in the church are, just lock, stock, in fellowship and everything like that. But you got the 10% that's out there actively stirring up trouble, and it can be trouble. It can be huge trouble for everybody.
I don't think people understand the severity of the damage with stuff like that.
I was just reading today about a study, there's been others too, this isn't the first time I've heard of it, but that take a group of individuals, and the study was basically put a group of people together, and the goal is to be the most efficient group, and they placed within the groups a negative person and different types of negative people. But in those instances with that negative person, no matter how hard of a good worker the other people were, that negative person almost always drug them down.
Yeah.
And took them all in the same direction.
Yeah.
And and really, the person that stirs up conflict, most often than not, they have problems with these other things that the Lord hates.
Oh, yeah.
And they're trying to take those things that the Lord hates and dump it on to somebody else and drag somebody else into it with them. And so they're not just destroying themselves and then destroying one person, they're leading other people into destroying other people.
Well, there are people who just think it's funny too,
Yeah.
just to make people argue and to
Yes.
just see the dysfunction that comes from it.
I think that there are people out there that have almost like a sickness of their heart, that they love to stir up trouble. They love to get something started and then sit back and delight over other people, going at it and thinking, I did it.
Is it like misery loves company kind of a thing? I'm miserable, so I want everybody else to be miserable, or?
Oh, well, yes, that can be it, but it's not, I don't think it's exclusively to that either. I mean, I think that there's just people that, for whatever reason, they just want to, and really, like for example, in a church setting, they really just allow foolishness to take over, allow the devil to take over, and the devil will use them to create trouble and stir up controversy and hurt the work of the Lord that's going forward.
Yeah, but they're not trying to do that. They're deceived. They're in pursuit of something else, like they lack patience and tolerance for iniquity. So they might see it as being like a righteous work that they're doing. But in not being tolerant of other people, they're stirring up conflict by being like very judgmental or very outspoken. But they're not the devil with horns saying, I'm doing Satan's work and I want to destroy everything you've created.
Well, right. I mean, I can agree with that. I do think that there are many times, like what you said, people have their own view of this is righteous, and so therefore, since this is righteous, then I'm going to allow myself to, follow through on it. I think that there are some people that, down deep in their sinful minds, they want to have that conflict and they want to have that power that's there, and so when they attach it to a righteous cause, then therefore they go full forward to it. I'm going to do this because I'm right. I'm going to do this because I'm going to correct everything. I'm going to do this because it's going to set the world right, but they don't realize or they don't care about the damage that they're doing as they're doing it.
I would say most people are not in that category. Most people don't like arguing. They don't like dissent.
Oh yeah.
They don't like conflict. The people who create a conflict a lot of times don't like the conflict. They're driven by something else. You're describing a psychopath, and less than like 5% of people are psychopaths.
Well, and that goes along with kind of what I was saying with these other ones is having haughty eyes, having a lying tongue, wanting to shed, wanting to go into wicked schemes. These things oftentimes lead somebody in the path of creating conflict within a group because they're just completely cut out. I mean, oftentimes the people I've run into the most create the most conflict are the people that if they're opening their mouth, they're saying something hateful.
Yeah.
And it's because they're so hateful within themselves because of their pride or because they're addicted to lying because they just like evil things that they stir up conflict everywhere they go. But I think there are a lot of people too that just don't even realize that they've got a problem with pride, and because of that they're dragging everybody into it.
Okay.
I guess whenever I think of this person, I don't think of somebody being like hateful and mean. I think of the person that's like one of my old coworkers. He hated his job. He was there because he had to be. And he would go to the like older ladies in the office and just like, so I heard Kim did blah da 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 da, and then just walk away and let it just bubble. Just watch it. think of like the hateful person just stirring up hate, I think of just like the little birdie that's just going around and
Sprinkling it.
sprinkling just annoying. Conflict is not even the word. Just like
Conflict's not a word.
that's not the word that I want to use.
Turmoil.
Conflict is the word that the Bible uses.
I know.
Well, anyway,
Disease.
we are.
Yeah.
What's that?
Go ahead. What'd you say?
I'm just throwing out the same.
I think kind of what the point is, we're all making, there's a lot of different versions of this. There's
Yeah.
a lot of
Oh,
different
yeah.
versions of people that are stirring up conflict, and the results are the same in every instance. Destruction.
We're late. What's that, Chloe?
They get laughs from it too. Like in our society, it's like a
Oh,
funny
yeah.
thing to be a pot stirrer.
Yeah. We're late on time, and so real quick, one 4-letter word that will be the cure for this. Love. Right? Now, love like the world, but love like what God does. Okay? Because according to Romans chapter 13, if we love, we fulfill the law. Love does no harm to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Okay, we will stop there. We will continue with chapters 8 and 9 next week. And so if you have any questions about this, just write them down, and we will talk about them next week, okay? All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Lord in heaven, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for the time that we spent in your word. We ask that you please help us to understand what wisdom is. Help us to apply it to our hearts and to our minds, and help us to take warnings from all of these commandments, all these principles that you set forth. Lord, please forgive us of our sins, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.